everybody, and welcome to Let's Look at Life Goes On. I don't know why the starting music at the main menu here just cut out. Sometimes it does that when you alt-tab. Don't hold it against the game. This is developed by Infinite Monkeys Entertainment. Self-published as well, I believe. And it's a puzzle platform, and I know what a lot of people are going to be saying here. Oh, great, another indie, like, 2D physics-based puzzle platformer. To some extent, I sort of feel the same way. But this is actually one of the better ones. But, you know, it actually has been... the game, by the way, just starts right away, but I'll explain what's going on here. There's been kind of a dearth of, like, 2D side-scrolling puzzle platformers lately, and that's a weird thing to say when we're in a space, you know, the indie space, at least on PC, where that was previously, like, the genre that everyone would look to and be like, well, great, another, like, physics-based indie puzzle platformer, Vessel, The Swapper, Braid, etc., etc., Limbo. So many. But now I think that's kind of ceded its dominance to, like, roguelikes, basically, which I'm okay with. But this really feels like kind of a classic, aka 2008 to 2011 era PC indie puzzle platformer. And it's got a unique gimmick. It's called Life Goes On. And the way that the game works, and it's a gimmick that I think is actually pretty neat, as opposed to just being like, oh, you can rewind time, or, oh, you know, we have fluid mechanics. You actually have to kill yourself, or many times. It's like a, you know, productive suicide, if you will, in order to beat a level. It's standard, like, left to right, just get to the exit as fast as you can. It's not open world or anything like that, which I actually prefer, because it's easier for me to get around. Yeah, it'll be easier to explain what's happening once we get into a level that's a little bit more complex. But basically, death is not the end in Life Goes On. Death is, merely a beginning. So if you look at a situation like this, there are switches in the game. It is very basic, looking at it for like 10 seconds, you can kind of figure out what's happening. It reminds me, visually, perhaps most similar to something like The Cave, which is cool. I thought The Cave was pretty good, but, you know, in terms of its gameplay, it's very different. So, this is a good example of how we can show off the gimmick of what's going on in Life Goes On. Just give me a second to lower my volume ever so slightly there. So, we have this saw up here at the top. This saw will kill us. We also have this switch. If we stand on the switch, this will cause this gate to go up, and then we'll be like, I'll just rush to the exit. Nope, we can't make it. So what we have to do, and you may have figured this out for yourself, is we actually have to kill ourselves on top of this switch. So we have to get our body parts to fall on top of the switch. They'll have a weight associated with them, and as a result, we can just walk through here and pick up the chalice and end the level. Now, when you complete a level, you have a couple of different criteria that you're judged on here, one of which is the number of your deaths, and the other one is how fast you did the level. So, I actually would like to go back and do that level again quickly so that maybe we can have a better chance to succeed. There is, I don't know if there's the capability of getting fail states, but there is like a restart level button, which I have found very, very useful at some times when I've kind of convoluted the situation beyond my ability to succeed. That one worked out a little bit better, I would say. So we're going to play through all of the mines here. I've played about an hour of Life Goes On so far, and honestly, I found some of the puzzles pretty difficult so far. It's going to start out pretty easy, but there is a difficulty spike that happens once they start introducing some new mechanics. But for now, let's just make a platform for ourselves here. So it is a little, almost like Trials-y in a way, that you want to avoid getting as many deaths as possible. By the way, we can come up here and get ourselves killed by this guy. I don't actually know what that accomplishes for us, but it seems to give us a check mark, which tells me like maybe that's like a secondary objective type thing. So this is kind of a neat new mechanic. Basically, if I hit that switch, you can see I can't get out of here, but I will respawn if I kill myself down this pit. So sometimes you do have to commit suicide and then, you know, respawn at your previous area to make it happen. So it's a game that's very much kind of, it turns original gaming conventions, not necessarily original gaming conventions, but original platforming conventions on their head. Rather than try not to die as much as possible, dying is actually something that is desirable at times in the game. Now, I do have some complaints about the game, and I'll offer those before we get a little bit further along, because, you know, I think it's prudent to show off what the bad things are as we're playing, but the game does get a little bit stronger as we move further and further ahead, I think, in my opinion at least. Visually, I think it's kind of, yeah, it's a little bit meh, in my opinion, I would say. It looks okay, there's some neat lighting and stuff like that, but it very much does look like, you know, a 2008 era indie game. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Let's kill ourselves in this here. The gameplay is very much the focus as opposed to the presentation, and that's fine. I'm totally okay with that. I also think the music, while pleasant, is a little bit, I don't know, generic. It might be a good way to put it. I'm not trying to insult the composer by saying that, but it feels like, you know, when you boot up some software, it'll play like a nice little pleasant sounding tone to be like, hey, don't worry about the fact that you spent $600 on this piece of software. we'll be totally cool with one another here. Just listen to this beautiful, like, pseudo-Mozart-esque piece. Tomo, it's okay, buddy. I'm not trying to insult Mozart here. You'll be alright. But yeah, and I think, you know, again, the music's pleasant. It sets an interesting atmosphere, but it doesn't necessarily wow me the way that music in something like Braid has wowed me previously in the past. Alright, so we're gonna hit this. And I believe that the switch causes the fire to go this way. So what we actually need to do here, if possible... well, again, death is not really that big of a problem in this game. What we need to do is very quickly hit this switch and then run. And then, yeah, we'll spawn back up at the top here and we'll create our own platform. Basically, what they're teaching us here is that fire causes bodies to disappear. So if you're trying to use a body to press a switch or something like that, that's not going to work if there is fire associated with it. Sorry, I have to placate my feline temporarily here. So this is where things start to get a little interesting and a little more difficult as well, I would say. You might look at this game and have the tendency to say, like, oh, that looks pretty gimmicky and shallow. And I disagree. And originally that's what I was thinking as well. Like, when I first started, like, killing myself to make platforms and stuff like that, I was like, okay, I get it. But that's not really... I'm just going to restart the level so I have a chance to get gold. That's not really where the game stops with it. And I think that's a very good thing, because it plays around with the formula a little bit more. You know what? Let me restart the level here, and I'll show off what I tried to do for, like, 10 minutes before I figured out how to solve this. So there's a switch down here. This switch moves this spike platform over here. And then well, it moves it back as well if we keep standing on it. Nice visualization in the background of what switch powers what mechanism, by the way, with those wires that glow. And then this one rotates it. So what I was doing, oh, yeah, then we just hit it again. There we go. And this switch causes this to raise up, which we actually want. But what I was thinking is that you, like, come over here and obviously you get eaten by this thing. It's like getting a gem in Crash Bandicoot. Again, it's kind of cool how the game even makes death part of the secondary objectives. So that eats us and then it falls asleep. And I was thinking for a while, like, can I get him to eat me in such a way that my body parts fall on the switch? Because otherwise, if we try to make this jump, we just get torn up. No, that is not how it works. So I will explain how it actually does work here, and how the game forces you to kind of think outside of your standard thinking patterns here sometimes. So, first things first, we are basically just going to kill ourselves as much as possible on top of this platform. To get gold on this one, we need to get 5 deaths. I apologize for shouting a little bit, but I'm noticing the music appears to be a little bit louder than I'm used to. So basically, we've created a big pile of bodies here, and then because we've created a platform on top of those bodies, physics should theoretically, well, it didn't work that time. But if we pile the bodies a little thicker there, physics should theoretically cause some of them to fall onto the switch, thereby allowing us to actually beat the level. So, let's try this one. That'll be 5 deaths, so that'll still allow us to get the A+ score on this one if we're lucky. Come on, come on. Okay, there we go. One of them actually did manage to fall, and that will allow us to, oop, I can't jump there. Run and move here and get to the chalice. I don't necessarily know if we're going to be at the gold medal level there. Actually, we did. I'm pleased with that. But this is my second time going through it, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. Hold your applause, please. Again, I think, you know, we saw there the animation sometimes a little bit funky as well. But keep in mind, you know, this is not a $30 indie game. It's not a $20 indie game. It's not even a $15 indie game. It's $12.99 on for $9.74 for its opening week sale, which may or may not be over by the time that this video actually comes out. And is it worth 10 bucks, 13 bucks? Absolutely, I think so. I know there's a lot of people out there who are really fatigued by puzzle platformers like this. That's okay. I was for a long time as well when I was playing 2 of them every single week after the success of Braid caused, like, 30% of indie developers to realize all of a sudden they wanted to make a platformer of their own. And, you know, there are other games, obviously, that contributed to that success as well. But to be overly reductive, I didn't even know there was a secret up here. To be overly reductive, that's the way I felt about it. But now, every one of their dogs making roguelikes, that's cool. I can kind of get down with being a little bit nostalgic for 2 or 3 years ago when I played these every single week. And this is a pretty good example of what I would consider to be one of the better ones. Now, the game does get a little bit more complex here as well. So, here, I'll show you what happens in the fail states, as I like to do in puzzle games. You put a body on the conveyor belt, but the fire causes it to get consumed, much in the way we will all be eaten by worms one day. But by hitting this switch, we can cause the fire to turn off, and then there we go. So this is very much not a puzzle game where you can just, as I like to say, set it and forget it. You have to be consciously paying attention in most levels to what's happening, and not all the levels in the game are created equal. I actually want to redo that one to maybe get a higher score if possible. Was that belting it out? Yeah, that was belting it out. Okay, let's try this out again and see if we can get a high score. Oh, okay, well, you know, the A+ times are actually pretty lenient. You can make a lot of mistakes and still have a very good chance for success. You just can't spend 15 seconds showing off the fail state as I did there in video format. So we'll just run back over here, and that should definitely do it. We only died twice. I think we can get a maximum of 3, which is pretty lenient considering that's like way below optimal. You can do it with 2, obviously. I don't think there's any way to do it with 1, but the levels, they do get more difficult. This one in particular introduces a mechanic where instead of just worrying about conveyor belts and fire and switches, you actually have to be paying very close attention to which one of these beacons you activate, because that's where you'll respawn when you die. So this switch causes that platform on the left side of the screen to be raised. It raises up to about that level. And what we can do is kill ourselves in the conveyor belt. This level took me forever, by the way. And, okay. Keep in mind, of course, every time I play a puzzle game, I like to add in that I'm really bad at puzzle games. So, for me to say, like, this is difficult, your mileage may vary with respect to that. But I have found myself getting stuck a couple of times. I actually did look up some walkthroughs on YouTube with some very helpful people who have completed the game themselves, and that helped me out a lot as I was struggling, even in the early game here. So if you're bad at puzzle games, you might run into the same kind of issue that I did. So, what happened here? When we got this body onto this switch, that raised this platform on the right side all the way up to the top. So we've got a long period of leniency there. What we should do now, because we want to make sure that this switch on the right is held, I think we want to trigger this beacon so we spawn down here, and then we raise this up as high as we can go. And I'll show you what the issue is, because we could like try to run for it and be like, oh, I'm gonna make it, oh, I'm not gonna make it. So what you have to do instead is be a little bit ingenious and choose where you're gonna be reincarnated. And then as soon as it happens, kill yourself and you can make it to the chalice here. It forces you to think a little differently. I'm not saying this is as much of a revolution for the, you know, puzzle genre as something like Portal is, which, to be honest with you, is probably as much of an influence on, you know, the fact that we had a shit ton of puzzle platformers to play back in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2012, as Braid was, because that only came out in 2009. But, yeah, it's neat. It's a cooler gimmick for me personally than a lot of the games that I have played over the past few years that maybe didn't necessarily knock it out of the park. I'm thinking of games like Ethan Meteor Hunter. That was mediocre to bad, I think, in my opinion, not to fire shots at the developers. Party of Sin, I thought, was not very good. This is much more of a solid game, and it's difficult to say that, well, let me put it this way. If you're having trouble believing me when I say that, I can understand that, because visually and from an audio standpoint, you know, this doesn't look as character-filled as something like, I don't know, Dust and Elysian Tale, which is obviously not a puzzle platformer, but you get the idea. It doesn't look necessarily as unique as something like a Bastion, or a Braid, or a Limbo, or even a Super Meat Boy, or something like that, or the Swapper. It doesn't kind of have that cool sci-fi, alien-esque aesthetic to it, or 2001: A Space Odyssey aesthetic, I guess, if we're being more accurate. But trust me when I say that the core gameplay, it's got it going on. It's pretty good. It's probably not going to be anybody's game of the year, but it could be. Let me put it that way. It's not unfathomable for me to suggest, or for me to think that somebody could consider this among their favorite games of this year. Well, not me personally, but I do think it is solid. So, on this one, I apologize for not really explaining everything that I've been doing lately, but trust me when I say that we will have some more stuff to talk about later as the game gets a little bit more difficult. Some of the levels do have some wonky physics. For example, this is, I don't know, maybe this is actually how physics should work in this situation, but we have kind of an uneven fulcrum here. And what we have to do in order to actually get to the top here, you know, in a lot of games like this, let me put it this way. If I jump on this thing at this end, it doesn't feel like it should rattle around like that and eventually go back to the top and then stabilize in a position like this. Maybe it should, though. But it makes it very difficult for us to get to the top there. So what we have to do is actually attach one of our bodies to the bottom of it. And I think the way that we want to do this is we can actually bump it up from this side like so, and just do that a couple of times. Get ourselves impaled there, and that will allow us... Tomo, it's okay, buddy. That will allow us to do this. So maybe the physics actually balance out in that situation. I'm not 100% sure, but we completed it nonetheless. Didn't get the gold medal there, but that's okay. So we're about 3/4 of the way done with the first levels of the game, and we get introduced to this kind of like Donkey Kong Country style mechanic, which honestly adds a little bit of variety to it. There's these cannons that kill you instantly, but also allow you to hit switches or, you know, engage in physics puzzles that would otherwise be completely impossible. And this is maybe their like trademark puzzle, I would say, from the first section of the game. So originally I spent like 10 minutes trying to like, maybe not 10 minutes, but like, I'm not that dumb. like 6 or 7 minutes trying to like bounce myself off of things and then like maybe land on the platform, try to jump that 6 or 7 times, didn't really work. Create a stack of bodies that would make it possible for me to jump on there. But the truth is actually much, much simpler and a little bit more clever as well. You get inside of this cannon and shoot yourself at that, and that causes these pendulums to start swinging, thereby allowing you to do that. And theoretically, we may be able to also make this jump here. No, we're definitely not going to be able to, but by then falling down, we can cause this one to swing a little bit better as well. Oh, that completely killed its momentum. Let's try this again. So we're going to wait until maybe it hits like its midpoint there. There we go. That is going to be more than enough velocity to get us up there. And we can actually get eaten there too if we want to. Apologies if that sounded dirty. I didn't mean it that way, but that's okay. I kind of did mean it that way. So 4 more levels left. Yeah, I mean, I've said a lot of what I wanted to say about Life Goes On. It's been on my radar for a little while because I constantly, like, you know, troll the Steam coming soon list, and it's been there for like a year. And I'm glad to see that it didn't fall victim to just being like, you know, just another indie puzzle platformer. Like, I think it, you know, Party of Sin in particular is not really necessarily recent, but kind of exemplifies that. So this puzzle is a very interesting one. If I remember correctly, we want to get that gate out there with the blue switch, which I just did, so that I can then... Oh, that was botched pretty heavily. So that I can then launch this over here, launch myself over here, I guess I should say, and then I'll get trapped in here, which is good. That turns off the fire, and then if I then launch one of my bodies onto this conveyor belt, we have a very cool end to this puzzle. So, there we go. That allows us to land on the conveyor belt. Then we want to step on this switch and rotate that around to green, which will cause the body to fall. Oh, no, we went too far. Which will cause the body to fall on the switch that I'm currently standing on. Get ready for this. Hey, okay, it almost, there we go. That body's gonna fall. And now we've basically, by way of our actions here, we've created a machine which will alternate turning these fire switches on and off. This is a really cool level, in my opinion. And when I figured it out, I was like, oh shit, that's kind of ingenious. We basically like built a robot that that does the level for us. Things do get a little bit more traditionally puzzly as well. Like in that situation, for example, we just had to activate that beacon. This level is all about activating these beacons that will then allow us to get further into the level. And these things, I thought these would be like a cool jumping puzzle where we'd like slingshot ourselves across them. They're not, unfortunately. Instead, they're actually meant to be obstacles. So we have to keep that beacon triggered and then make our way back here without triggering these beacons. We can trigger those beacons up there if we want to get eaten by that grue, but we don't necessarily want to. So that's just how we get around that. And we can activate this, and I hope that to some extent you're kind of feeling what well, I don't hope that you're feeling this, but I hope that you can understand where I'm coming from with respect to the music of the game. Like this, it strikes me as kind of like some uplifting, almost like Enya style stuff, and I don't mean that as an insult to anybody, particularly the composers or Enya, but it doesn't necessarily fit with the macabre nature of the game. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you feel differently. I read some reviews of this. GameSpot actually reviewed this. And they said that the atmosphere was something they enjoyed a great deal, so your mileage may vary with respect to that. Oftentimes I come into these games and I say, it doesn't really tickle my fancy from a visual standpoint, and then people go like, you're crazy, this game looks wonderful. Sure, by all means. Don't let me stop you. As always, I would like to add that, you know, do your own research. That's something that I would absolutely suggest if you are ever wary about the way that I handle my business. Look at other sources. It's just a good idea in general if you're going to be purchasing a product. Don't just read one review. What if I was paid off by Infinite Monkeys? You know, that's how you know I wasn't paid off, because if I had to sign a contract with them, I totally would have remembered their name. So we've got some physics-based stuff here. We have, I mean, the game varies a little bit in terms of like how much you have to use the death mechanic. We didn't have to use it too much on this level. This was more of just a standard, like, you know, wait around and platform. But it strikes a good balance. And I think we are now on the last level of the mines, and this will be the level that we stop the video on. But there are visually distinct areas. I actually don't know how long the game is specifically. But again, that's why it's a good idea to do your own research. But yeah, beating the mines took me about an hour without knowing how to solve the puzzles. Your mileage may vary with respect to that. I imagine for, you know, people who are half decent at puzzle games, which I am absolutely not, that might be like 15, 20 minutes even. And then there are other worlds throughout the game as well. I don't know necessarily how many, but there are other worlds. So let's get impaled on this if possible. It's a false sense of urgency. We're not going to be killed by the lava at any point here. There we go. Get ourselves up here. And, I mean, this might actually just work. Yeah, we could have also done the actual, like, switch-based puzzling there, but that's okay. So we come through here. Hit this switch. Oh, I remember now. Okay, so we hit this switch. And again, this is why you have to be active in this game. Alternate the switches as necessary to land on that final switch, which will then allow us to actually platform up there. Very clever. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing here pretty much. Get ourselves killed on this platform so we can then rise up to the top. And in mere moments, that should work out. And I think that'll be the end of the level for us. And that'll also be the end of Let's Look at Life Goes On. Easy to look at it and look at a screenshot or something like that and be like, it looks okay. But truth be told, that's a little bit disingenuous. Game's pretty good. I liked it. Don't write it off just from if you don't like the visuals of it. And a lot of people will like the visuals of it. More power to you. You can go to the mountains here. You can see visually distinct areas. More or less. I guess that turns off the spikes. Interesting. So we'd like get ourselves killed on the spikes and then wait for the conveyor belt to come back around. Check this shit out, alright? Let's see how much I know about the mechanics of Life Goes On. It's gonna come back around. And he's... Oh, no, you know what? The fire. The fire. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Get ourselves killed. Cause the spikes... Okay, get ourselves killed. Fall off the spikes on top of that switch. Worked perfectly. Turns off the fire. Then we can just walk through here. It was a little bit less complicated than I originally thought, actually. But hey, wait! We can't actually land on the conveyor belt. So what do we have to do? Get ourselves killed, and then get ready to cause this body to fall on the spikes as well. The fact that I'm still playing it, even when I could turn it off right now... I mean, I'm not... Again... Not necessarily saying this is the best indie puzzle platformer of all time. I'm saying it's a solid one. And I think if you are a fan of this kind of genre, you'll find a lot to like in Life Goes On. And I'm not always a fan of this genre, but it has been kind of refreshing to go back and play it a little bit. And for everybody that's saying, like, oh god, another indie puzzle platformer, you gotta get deeper into the scene, man, if you're gonna be dismissive and cynical like that. This is very much a throwback to 2011, 2012, which I realize we're only 2 years past that, but man... I imagine in 2016, everyone's going to be like, oh good, another indie roguelike, if they're not already. But anyway, that's completely different from what this game actually is. Life Goes On! $9.74 for its opening week sale on Steam. That's 25% off of its original retail price of $12.99, which it probably will be by the time this video goes up. If you're interested, and I imagine some of you will be, based on this video, go check it out on Steam. Link will be in the video description below. And from a personal level, if you like the video, click the like button. It helps out a great deal. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more first impressions like this in the future. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.